Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this study session meeting of the Board of Trustees. Call the meeting to order. And we'll stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Note for the record that all trustees are present this evening, including our student trustee Kenny Beshi. Trustee Abood, just in the nick of time. Welcome. Next item on the agenda is public comments, but we have received no comment slips, so we will, unless there's somebody who wished to comment on a particular item, we will move forward. And our first item is item 3.2, presentation by Vice President Marino on the status of the School for Extended Learning. Welcome. Ooh, handouts.
Good afternoon. Board President Miller, members of the board, Superintendent President Dr. Goswami. Thank you for inviting the School of Extended Learning to present during this study session. We will briefly present on extended learning in general, and then I will welcome up our dual enrollment director and our director of the Santa Barbara Adult Education Consortium. Thank you. So first, let me remind you that in 2016, under Dr. Beebe's leadership, we essentially brought back free adult education in response to great community demand. We integrated fee-based programs. We house off-campus programs, including dual enrollment and cosmetology, and we continue to maximize our tuition-free programs. Our extended learning team is passionate about our mission and goals. And here are the goals we are working toward: to be innovative and creative in our programming, to meet community demand, to ensure fiscal sustainability, and promote inclusivity and high morale. In addition, we are engaged in continuous process improvement and work hard to be efficient and streamlined. Here is our incredibly hardworking team who are so committed and passionate about the work we do. I am full of tremendous gratitude for their work, their growth, and they are responsible for our success in every way. This is not the presentation. This is the second annual report PDF, and I need the, no, there's a PowerPoint. The BOT presentation, yes. Yes. Is that the PowerPoint? Yes. Well, I can keep going without it. Okay. I handed out the full second annual report, and what I'm presenting from is a reduced presentation slide.
I sent it to you.
It's posted on the
I
agenda.
sent recently.
Well, no, it's posted on the agenda.
I thought you changed it. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I want the one on the agenda. Okay.
But we have it here.
Yes,
She's
I'll
gonna-
keep going.
She's going to get it up.
So, anyway,
So we're in the head count.
okay, our unduplicated head count continues to grow. We are now serving over 6,000 students, which is more than doubling of students since 2016. One of our early strategies was to reduce our fee-based program to make room for our tuition-free programs. We are leveling off our reductions of our fee-based program, and that revenue is continuing to support our marketing needs. If you take a look at that slide that shows this inverse correlation between the reduction of fee-based and then the tremendous growth of our tuition-free programs. All of our tuition-free programming has resulted in a correlating growth in FTS. Our revenue, which is our revenue measurement, we have exceeded our growth targets every year since inception, and we continue to plan to grow. Our fiscal performance has been very positive, and our excess revenue last fiscal year was $2.2 million, and we are on track to produce excess revenue of $2.8 million this current fiscal year. Our focus at Extended Learning has turned to telling stories of our most marginalized and low-resource students who have come to Extended Learning and who have succeeded. Juan Perez is only one example of the stories we are collecting and telling. And finally, we have done so much to improve the student experience and how students enter our program and register for classes. And our students have been happy with these efforts that we have been made to elevate our engagement with them on this issue. And this is the first time we've seen the words enjoyable and stress-free connected to our registration process.
Yay.
I would like to now turn it over to Claudia Johnson, our Director of Dual Enrollment.
Good afternoon, Board President Trustee Miller, members of the board, and Superintendent President Dr. Goswami. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you about the success of our students in the dual enrollment program. As stated in our mission, we want dual enrollment opportunities to reduce the access and equity gaps in higher education. And as such, we have worked hard to dispel the common view of dual enrollment as another type of advanced placement. Julissa Garcia and I believe strongly in what the data has proven, that students across all demographics benefit from early access to college, but underrepresented students benefit the most. Our offerings reflect these goals. Only 6 of our 30 course offerings in the 183 sections require English or math placement. The remaining courses are truly open access to students in the high schools. The result of our outreach efforts and close collaboration with high school staff is here. On average, 30% of students at each high school take a dual enrollment class at their campus each year for a total count of 3,400 students each year. Our overall efforts include summer bridge programs and summer book funding. As you can see in this slide, we've successfully achieved an overall increase in FTEs and a significant increase in the number of underrepresented student participants with more growth planned. So I'll call your attention to the summer headcount, which is the red line, and our white and Hispanic Latinx student trends up there. We've managed to flip while still increasing overall access so that our Hispanic Latinx populations for dual enrollment match more closely to the high school populations and demographics. All right. College and career access pathway agreements are in the works with Santa Barbara Unified and Carpinteria Unified School Districts. In addition, we'll be piloting a managed enrollment system that will transform how we register students at the high school. So we'll be shifting from an opt-in model to an opt-out model by working with them in 8th grade and working with the junior high school counselors so that the parent consent piece, the application, and the counselor approvals are all in place when they enter 9th grade. And that will allow us to capture students and not let obstacles like enrollment be a factor in students getting the credit they deserve. This will ensure that we further our access and equity goals in dual enrollment. Thank you.
And now we'd like to invite Corley Prieto, our director of our adult education program.
Good afternoon, Board of Trustee Miller, members of the board, and Superintendent Dr. Goswami. Thank you for having me and the invitation to speak about our exceptional Santa Barbara Adult Education Consortium. Before we dive into our major accomplishments, it's important to understand the primary goals behind the California Adult Education Program, CAEP, legislation. In 2015, the Department of Finance and the California Community College Chancellor's Office appropriated $500 million to local consortia to provide educational programming to adult learners in our community. CAEP focuses on educational programming solutions to community issues for those that lack foundational basic learning skills and high school credentialing, are unemployed, and those that live below the poverty line. The state also asks that we support those with less than the 7th grade education, those that do not speak English, and those with disabilities. The needs of these populations guide our funding goals and allocations. Led by a very progressive consortium comprised of educational and workforce representatives in our region, the consortium's goals are to, 1, continue providing non-credit adult education programming informed by local economic research and demographics. 2, assist students in their transfer, acceleration, and career success. 3, develop a comprehensive data collection and accountability infrastructure that cross-pollinates with our statewide initiatives. And lastly, supports our external partners that specialize in job placement, pre-apprenticeship, internship, and job coaching. Through a competitive annual request for proposal process, the consortium selects programs that bolster and marry with SBCC's mission, meet the consortium and statewide objectives, and focus on programs that advance students' economic mobility and career advancement. So a testament to this effort, something that we're very proud of, is our consortium's commitment to our community by awarding more than 70% of our funding to SBCC and community programs. This is a phenomenal accomplishment because this has been realized consistently over the past 4 years since its inception and sets us apart from other consortia throughout the state. With an average of $800,000 annually, our consortium's goals have yielded a multitude of results that have changed people's lives. To name a few of our accomplishments, and just a few, we have awarded a state certificate in leadership to the first female inmate at our local Santa Barbara County Jail. We founded the first adults with disabilities program in the state, focused on work readiness and career planning. We have forged invaluable partnerships with the local workforce, offering SBCC Career Skills Institute courses at the local social services building in downtown Santa Barbara. We've partnered with our local libraries to provide literacy, computer, English language, and dyslexia support to well over 25,000 adult learners. We believe in the prosperity through partnership and elevating the livelihood of adult learners through education and student support services. We're incredibly lucky to have this state funding like this that has had such an incredible impact in our community. So I thank you for your time and welcome each of you to attend our monthly first Wednesday of the month CAEP public meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the conclusion?
That's the conclusion.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It was a wonderful report. Thank you to Melissa and Claudia and Corley for telling us all the positive things that are happening. It's really exciting, I think, to hear about all the good things that's going on in the community through the School for Extended Learning. So thank you. And I'm sure we've got some comments, questions. Start with, why don't we just start down the, Jonathan?
So I think a year to a year and a half ago, there was new legislation that was supposed to help create more partnerships on CTE on dual enrollment. And I know the requirement was that we had to create a contract with our school district, and I know we didn't do that, but I know that legislation still exists, and it's still something that really interests me, and we have talked about it at the board level positively in the past. Has that been brought up by the high school district at all in terms of interest in more CTE classes as a part of dual enrollment? Is that already maybe part of the curriculum that is offered, or how can we do more on that front?
So we are working with our local districts. We have drafts. They're called CCAP agreements, and they benefit both parties because it removes this artificial requirement that we invite everyone in the community into the high school, so we're allowed to limit it to just high school students.
Right.
So we have drafts throughout our districts, and we're working on creating new programming, and we're focused on guided pathway efforts to get students starting in the high school and a CTE pathway to come to the college. So that is in the works.
Okay.
And once or twice a year, we have a principal's breakfast, and we work toward whatever the goals are for that year. And so that is one of our goals this year, is to complete our CCAPs.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Parker?
I've got a dual enrollment question and an adult ed question. For dual enrollment, just on page 18 of the slides, it would be great to see the breakout demographically, including the demographic percentages of the districts, so that we could see, are we matching, is our enrollment kind of equivalent, or are there some demographic groups that we should be reaching out to more? I'm super pleased to hear about the ways you're working to streamline enrollment. As a former parent who went through that process and like trying to drag my kid to get the form and turn it in and find the counselor and all that stuff, anything you do in that area I think is going to be great, and the projections are wonderful. So it really is a win for our local students. And I can't emphasize again how much dual enrollment can save parents in college tuition if they send their kids during high school when it is free. It's so many of my friends, and certainly I have benefited from that as well. It's a huge benefit. So I hope parents keep that in mind. On adult ed, I do have one question about the classes that are for older adults.
Yeah.
I think it's 55 and up.
Yes.
If there's space in a class, is there any way to create hybrid classes? Does that happen? Is it possible where you're running a class that's for older adults, but then you have space and you have some 50-year-olds that want to take the class and are able to pay? Is it possible to combine in that way, or is the code such that you simply cannot do that?
Well, what the law requires us to do is to design courses for ages 55 and over. And if you travel to our campuses and go in our classrooms, most of the students are well above 55, but anyone can attend.
Okay, that's great to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Gallardo, looks like you've got a question.
For you, Trustee Miller, I just want to say thank you to Melissa and the team, and Jonathan's question. I'm so empathetic, and they have been working so hard. And this is more a conversation for us, the trustees. If there's anything in the way of a CCAP course development or pathway, it is not for lack of innovation on this side of the house or lack of willingness. This team, and I've been on this monthly since last March, since the history courses got slashed at the high school. Not slashed, sorry, let me rephrase that. Since the history courses got reworked and students are no longer able to fulfill a high school graduation requirement with our history course, but they can fulfill a college requirement. So currently kids can qualify to UCSB but then they won't get a high school diploma from Santa Barbara Unified because as our history courses where we worked, they no longer. So anyway, our high school is trying to work on that, and Melissa and the team, they've been phenomenal. I participated in the webinar for the pathways and the CCAP courses. I think that for us, it's the next, when we have a joint meeting with Santa Barbara Unified Carpinteria, this is really something that we need to work with our local education agencies here, because Santa Barbara City College can have all this innovation, all these great ideas, but if our local education agencies like HARP and Santa Barbara Unified are not ready for what we have, and there's so much in course articulation. I'll tell you, Jonathan, for the academies, I mean, both my son started the pathway for construction at junior high, and the bottlenecks that now we're getting at the high school, like, make me want to literally pull my hair out. And then my kids are also doing computer science. Despite the fact that California has now a computer science framework, Santa Barbara Unified is not funding computer science courses. So I, as a parent, have to fundraise $100,000+ to pay for a teacher. So really, there's a lot of disparities there. And then Kate, I mean, to your point with the demographic breakdown, I've looked at that, but as you know, when we look at the data for Santa Barbara Unified, if the kids aren't reading at grade level in high school, we can't expect them to succeed in one of our high school history courses. And so I just think that there's a lot of work with the way AB 705 has been reworked, and a lot of opportunity for us to help our local high school students who are going to be our students later, to get them the literacy skills they need while in high school to be successful through a dual enrollment course and when they get here. So I just think there's a lot of work that I think we can do when we meet with them. So if you can make note of something like that, because I'm just super impressed with the work they've done and how much they have been able to do with, our partners, so.
Got my notes.
Good.
My note.
And it's on video in case you forget.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Haslund.
I'm glad you used the term bottleneck, because living in Carpinteria, I am all too painfully aware of the upcoming bottleneck as Highway 101 gets a makeover, let's say. I get phone calls fairly regularly from constituents in Carpinteria concerned that there's no facility in Carpinteria that will do for them what the Wake Center does for Goleta and the Schott Center does for Central Santa Barbara. So, I mean, as you know, I've been interested in this for a while, and I just want to make sure that we're still moving in the direction of finding a facility that can, at least in an interim fashion, begin to explore the market, the educational market in Carpinteria. That wasn't really a question. It was more of a statement. I'm looking to you for guidance on the matter in hopes that you'll agree. Tell me something good about what's happening.
Well, of course, I have to defer to Dr. Goswami on any strategic direction that we decide to take in Carpinteria, but I have to say we have a wonderful relationship with Gerardo Cornejo, the principal of Carpinteria High School, who also sits on our Santa Barbara Adult Education Consortium. And
he's one of the guys that calls me.
Yeah, and we're in constant contact about what we might be able to do in the high school, supporting their adult high school program or in other locations. But I'm happy to have the conversation and defer to Dr. Goswami on how we move forward.
Good.
Trustee Nielsen?
Yes. Over the past couple of years especially, I've had a few comments from my constituents about being able to audit adult education classes, just to see what it's like. And I've been just telling them to go to the Wake or Schott Center or get on the phone and ask. And I was curious, they didn't get back to me with any results, and I was curious about, do you get questions like that? And how do you handle it? And do you call it auditing and like it's okay to go to a class?
Every student who is in the classroom must be enrolled, and it's tuition free.
Right.
So our front office staff at both Wake and Schott would be able to help anyone that comes in to get enrolled if we have seats available. And because it's tuition-free, there's not a reason in the world why they wouldn't enroll. And then we get to count the hours that they're sitting in seats to help fund receive apportionment from the state.
Okay.
So the faculty know that we can't allow anybody in the classroom that's not enrolled.
Okay. You answered my question in that regard.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the dual enrollment students, sometimes young people just aren't sure if they can handle it, if they can do it. And it occurred to me, not that anybody asked me, but it occurred to me, can those students, on rare occasions, be allowed to audit a class to see what goes on and what it's like if they're overly anxious? These are young students. I don't know how you handle that. And to find out, should they be talking to their high school counselors, or where do I tell them to go to?
So I'm not sure what our auditing rules are for our credit classes.
Right.
But we allow minors to enroll in adult ed. They just have to have a minor enrollment form that's signed by the appropriate authorities, their parent
Okay.
or guardian, and they have to be, I think they have to be 16 or older to qualify for minor enrollment.
Okay.
So-
And for the dual enrollment students that might want to participate in that, I have a number of constituents in my area that both parents are working, they don't have college education, they don't really understand this, and I think there's quite a few that are not taking advantage of it. Maybe the students are told in school, but when they come home and ask their parents, the parents don't know what they're talking about, and that's hard. And for those students, do they just need more time with their counselors at the high schools, or how is that done?
Our staff spends a lot of time in the high schools.
Okay.
And there's a lot of opportunity for gaining information at the high schools about credit programs and about dual enrollment in the high schools.
Okay.
So there's no shortage of information at the high schools for our high school students.
I get questions and I refer them there, but they don't come back, so they must be getting helped.
Let's hope so.
Hopefully, I'm hoping they didn't give up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very good presentation.
Thank you.
Trustee Croninger.
Just following up for a minute on Peter's question, I certainly support the idea of improving access for our people in Carpinteria. That's been a long-standing issue. I think everyone supports it when we've talked about it. Are you following up also on the interest we had in looking for a place for additional adult ed classes? We had started that process, and I'm hoping we're still planning to go forward.
I don't understand which one you're referring to, a location in Carpinteria, or?
Yes, a location in Carpinteria for adult ed classes.
Well-
We were originally looking for a facility to lease and an ability to expand the offerings that we have down there.
Yeah, so under our interim superintendent president, we shelved that. And so Dr. Goswami and I have had a conversation, and Peter and I have been in contact, and so that's something that's definitely still on the table for consideration. Yeah.
Good, because I think the demand is still there.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just a footnote. The reason for my increasing concern and just a little bit of agitation is that we know that 101 is going to be under construction. It's tough enough now to get here. So we really need to move on this, because I've had any number of people tell me they'll sign up at the Schott Center, they love the class, and by the second meeting, they'll give up. So what we don't know, I guess, is what is that number? How many people will actually sign up and stay? And I understand that that's a marketing issue and a demand issue, frankly, and we don't know the answer to those, but I think we should find out. I know that there was a facility, because I was in touch with the superintendent of Carpinteria Unified, and there was a facility behind the high school that is soon going to be available. And so there may be an opportunity for us to field test before making any kind of substantial investment in Carpinteria.
We do currently have ESL courses in Carpinteria at the Carpinteria Children's
high school.
Center.
Yeah.
And so, and those classes go. So we have a demand for ESL, we know that much. And I don't think we're clear on what the true demand is to be able to support a full-blown extended learning option. But certainly we could test the market and, start offering a more variety of programs.
The
But
three
again,
areas that I've been contacted about have to do with Spanish language training, have to do with arts and crafts kinds of activities, and ESL.
Yeah, I believe ceramics was one of the ones that was particularly requested.
Great.
Yeah. So,
Well, if there's
but we don't-
opportunity, we should explore it, certainly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. We're going to take the next, thank you all again. We're going to take the next item a little bit out of order. Instead of 3.2, we're going to move to 3.5.
Cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity.
Board President Miller, members of the board, Superintendent President Goswami, thank you for hearing my report today. I'm Jim Clark, Director of Information Technology over Infrastructure and Security, and I have submitted a comprehensive report on cybersecurity at the college, and I'd like to present you with a mercifully brief summary of that report. So the report provides details on the current status of cybersecurity protections implemented by the college. In the report, you will see that we make every effort to implement industry standards and best practices towards cybersecurity, and we maintain multiple internal standards and controls to ensure the security of our data and computing infrastructure. We use the CIA approach to security, and that does not mean Central Intelligence Agency. It actually stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We ensure confidentiality by providing protection from unauthorized access and misuse of data, meaning that private data is accessed only by those who are supposed to have access to it. Integrity means that we provide protection from unauthorized tampering of data. The data you get is reliable and correct and hasn't been messed with, essentially. Availability means that the systems and data are up and running and available to access when you need them. These three tenets provide the umbrella under which all aspects of cybersecurity are managed. Confidentiality is maintained by making sure that the data is not accessed by anyone who shouldn't access it. And we start by making sure user accounts are secure through the use of passwords, but more importantly through the use of multi-factor authentication. And this means that having more than one factor that a user uses to authenticate. And those two factors are usually something you know and something you have. That something you know being the password, and something you have usually is your smartphone. So you will log in with your username and password, and then you'll receive a text on your smartphone that will confirm who you are. So if your password gets compromised, they also have to steal and unlock your phone, which is unlikely a hacker would be able to do both of those things. So this kind of extra security is typical with online banking and other websites where there's secure data, so you might have actually seen this out in the wild. You might actually be using it yourself. We also monitor our accounts for suspicious activity, such as logging in from different countries or starting to download large amounts of data from those countries, and we can take action when we see something out of the ordinary like that. We have access controls in place to regulate what data we have and who or what can access that data. And we scan and monitor the places where our data is stored to make sure that sensitive data is not being kept in the wrong place or out in the open or being shared with people it shouldn't be shared with. We perform assessments to make sure that the controls are in place properly. We do internal self-assessments. We also work with the California Community Colleges Information Security Center, which is funded by the Chancellor's Office, to assist us with assessing our cybersecurity. And because we take credit cards on campus, we work with a company that does annual assessments and certifies us that we have the right security in place to stay compliant with the credit card industry's standards around data security as well. And we provide security awareness training to all new hires and employees with access to confidential student and employee data. This training educates employees about cybersecurity, including the proper procedures for working with data and technology. And I'd like to invite the board to sit in on the awareness training with me. If you're willing, I can schedule that with Angie. Dr. Goswami has already attended it and can vouch for the usefulness of that training. Integrity is making sure that our data is not tampered with. We scan and monitor the places where our data is stored to make sure that there's no corruption or infection by viruses or harmful applications. We use industry standard software to protect our desktops as well from viruses, spyware, ransomware, and the like. We use privilege management best practices, and that's so that the users of a computer system don't have more access to that system than they need, which helps prevent viruses from taking control of the system. We make sure our Windows and Mac computers have the latest security patches to the operating systems. We log access to our systems and regularly audit those logs for anomalies. As mentioned previously, we perform internal and external assessments of our cybersecurity processes to make sure that what we're doing follows industry best practices. We back up our critical data so that we can restore it in the event of data loss or corruption. And the security awareness training that we provide helps make sure that the employees are not mishandling data improperly. Availability is making sure that the systems and data are accessible when you need to access them. And we build in redundancy into our network connections and our satellite campuses, connections to the internet, and in our servers where our data and applications are housed. We use industry standard firewalls to safeguard our internet connections to keep the bad guys out. We have intrusion detection and prevention appliances on our internal network that monitor the traffic for suspicious activity. We scan our network and computers for vulnerabilities such as viruses or operating system problems that could cause computer crashes. We routinely have testing done to make sure our network can't be penetrated either from the outside or from the inside of our network. And we have backups so we can restore critical data and systems in the event of a crash or other problem. Planning is a big part of our staying on top of cybersecurity, and just like the college does with its educational master plan and our district technology planning, we also do a lot of planning around cybersecurity. We have our own internal information security plan to identify and assess the risks and develop procedures to manage and control those risks. We have an incident response plan which prepares us to address cybersecurity incidents when they occur. We have an information security group, which is a subgroup of the District Technology Committee, and this group guides the strategy and direction of our cybersecurity efforts. We also work closely with the Information Security Center out of the Chancellor's office, which I spoke about previously, and they help by providing us assessments and other tools for us to use. And they host the Information Security Advisory Committee, which is a statewide version sort of what our information security group is, with representatives from all the California community colleges participating and sharing resources. And I serve on that committee representing Santa Barbara City College. And we routinely assess and revise our plan and our processes to make sure they are current and provide us with the best practices towards cybersecurity. So that sums up the report that's been submitted, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Trustee Croninger.
I'm not quite sure if this is your area, but my question is, as you know, when a person has an email address with an EDU on it, it entitles them for a lot of discounts and ways to save money because they're presumed to be a student. I understand there was an issue with, at some point, with attempts to obtain those emails by people who really didn't intend to come to the college, but for the purpose of the discounts.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, how did that appear to you? How did you come upon this issue? And then how did you address it within the context of what we're talking about?
Well, there's a couple of different things about that. First and foremost, you are correct. There are people that will create EDU addresses because they actually have resale value. So if you have an EDU address, there's a lot of things you can do with it. You can get discounts on software. You get free Google services from us, including unlimited storage. You get Microsoft OneDrive. You get access to software. There's a lot of different things that you can get with an EDU address. And our goal is to make sure that those EDU addresses are only allocated to people who have the right to have them, which is enrolled students or previously enrolled students within a period of time. And so what came to our attention is we began to see misuse of our resources. We began to see overuse of some of our Google storage. We began to see some of our EDU addresses going for sale on eBay. We began to see a lot of these kind of issues and began to immediately take controls to put in place to prevent that sort of thing from happening. So part of it is spam controls put on the CCC apply process that help reduce a lot of that. Some of those controls we added ourselves. We've also put controls in place and are continuing to revise those controls so that when somebody applies to the college, they're not immediately given all the access, all the keys to the kingdom. They have to actually go through the process of enrolling in classes. And once a student is enrolled, if they're enrolled in classes and they remain active as a student, they're allocated those resources and they're provisioned what they're supposed to be. But if they never enroll or they just enroll and immediately with, there's ways we can tell who's a legitimate student and who's actually abusing our resources. And so we have controls in place that we're actually revising that process all the time to prevent that sort of thing from happening.
Thank you.
I would like to add that, one of the things that's really is tripping us up is we get thousands of applications to come to SPCC, but those are all fake accounts.
Not all of them, but when you get 10,000 over a weekend, you kind of have to stand back and go, all right, wait a second.
How is it that we have 10,000 applicants coming over a weekend?
Right.
So I think that's why now. In the past, we used to give them basically, the moment you're an applicant, here's your EDU account, use it and look at our website. Now we don't give them all of that. I mean, we give them full access, I understand, is only when they actually enroll.
Yeah, they get a limited set of resources handed to them. They are given an EDU email address, but that EDU email address, we're putting processes in place so the only people you can email with the EDU address are within Santa Barbara City College domain. So you can email other sbcc.edu addresses. And this is so that faculty and admissions and other offices within the college can communicate with the student and the student can communicate with them. And there are other certain addresses where we do mailers and things to students. So we have those email addresses available, but it's internal only. They don't get to email the outside world or receive email from the outside world, which devalues those on the resale market. Now those EDU addresses don't have that value that they had before. So those are the processes we're putting in place to prevent that.
I'm guessing we're not the only one with this problem.
Oh, no, we are not. We are far from it. It's a countrywide problem. So the Chancellor's Office, like I said, they've been working on the CCC apply process to put some controls in place there. And again, we're doing additional controls on our end as well.
Trustee Abood.
Yeah, my question is, last year, around this time, we had a lot of people contacting the college, angry about things. And what I was concerned about at that time, and what I'm still concerned about, is people orchestrating like a denial of service attack on our websites and our servers. Mm-hmm. So how are we prepared to respond to something like that when people try to flood our accounts and websites to try to shut them down?
Well, fortunately, knock on wood, up to this point, we haven't had a denial of service related to that particular instance. We have our own protections in place here as far as the hardware and things that we put in place, plus Scenic, who is the provider of our internet service, provider for all the California community colleges. Mm-hmm. They have protections upstream from us to prevent that as well. And so if we were under a denial of service attack, Scenic can reroute some of their resources to accommodate that accordingly. So we would work closely with them in the event of that happening.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee Parker.
Hi, thank you. And I'm very interested in the training, so I look forward to hearing more about opportunities for that.
Yes, I would be happy to do that.
Yeah. My question is about Google Groups, and I want to thank all of you and Vice President Bishop here for clarifying that it is group visibility that is still set at all organization members and view topics is now default to all members of the group.
Correct.
However, when I do a search, it's quite clear that there are a lot of Google groups on campus that don't understand that their emails are not private. And then some that do. And I guess my question for you, because one of the groups that's set for all organization members is IT managers. Why is it that you'd want anybody at SBCC to be able to read emails that go to IT managers?
There's an argument that could be made that actually none of the email at Santa Barbara City College is particularly private. With the Public Information Act, a discovery can be made on any email, any group message. All of that is actually public record, to be technical. Information that comes to IT managers, we don't actually have confidential conversations within that group. A lot of it is just notifications to the managers group, or 90% I think is actually from the managers group. A lot of it is the managers scheduling meetings between each other. So the nature of the conversations in IT managers group is not a high-risk area. So that's not one where we particularly have it locked down. The default when somebody creates a group is that the visibility of the messages within that group are visible to the members only, and it's up to the administrator of that group to adjust those permissions accordingly. And all groups are actually only discoverable within the Santa Barbara City College domain. So it is rather limited, but what the protections allow for is the settings for any group administrator can go in and adjust those and make them as public or private as needed. Now, confidential groups or hiring committee groups and those types of things, those are supposed to be internal and basically not discoverable and not viewable because of the nature of the conversations that go on there. Again, legally discoverable, but not just browsable by somebody with curiosity, right? So again, it's the nature of the conversations that go on with those groups. If there was something that needed to be of a personnel nature, personnel or confidential HR issue or something to be discussed among the IT managers, we don't do it within the group setting. We'll actually either meet in person or we'll actually do it in one-on-one or just do copies of messages to one another as opposed to using the groups. Groups we use more for system-wide notifications, things like that.
The only thing that I would follow up with is that it is clear that some groups don't understand that.
This is true.
And I think it would be worthwhile to explain to them again that, if their department has it set so that all organization members, I can put in a search term in Google Groups, and I can see things that I think that they would think are sensitive. And we can all read those emails. So I would highly recommend that if anybody is an administrator of a Google group here on campus, that they revisit that.
That's true, and it's actually an excellent point. And we do make efforts to educate our staff and faculty. I know the FRC, the Faculty Resource Center, does a lot of training for faculty on the right way to manage their groups, and we also offer Google training, usually doing in-service and things like that for staff as well. And when I do come across a group, if we're doing an internal audit of our groups, there's a lot of groups that are old, and we have to go through and prune them every now and then and see what's out there. And when I do see a group that has, either by nature of what that group is or by the conversations that are in that group and it appears to be public, we will reach out to the owners or managers of those groups and say, hey, you may want to consider adjusting this. So as we come across those when we're doing our own internal audits, we do want to reach out to people and make that happen. So it is a matter of educating our staff and faculty.
Marcia?
Well, I'd just follow up that I think your first point in answering the question is very important, which is with very limited exceptions, these are public records.
Absolutely.
So nobody should go into that, even if you adjust your settings, with the idea that they are always private. They could be public records if somebody asked. And so the default expectation should be these are public. What you're saying is public.
That's actually very true. And in my security awareness training, and one of the things I like to point out in that training is, and anytime I'm talking to somebody about this issue, is to point out that nothing you say in email is private, whether it's really here or not. Because once you click send on an email, you've lost all control over that email, right? What the recipient does with that email is entirely up to that person. They could forward it to a reporter. They could print it out and leave it on a printer somewhere. They could get their email account compromised, and as a result, anything you've ever sent them is now compromised. So along those lines, I like to counsel people that please don't say anything in email that you wouldn't want to see on the 6 o'clock news, because it could potentially end up there.
Yeah, and I think people have this misconception about a lot of information, because I remember not a few years back when salaries were published, which are now easily available in many places, but it was kind of a new thing to publish them on the internet, and people got all upset and said, wait a minute, that's confidential. No, it's not. You're a public employee. And people's expectation was quite different.
Correct.
Trustee Igbechi?
Thank you for the good work you do. My question is, do you plan to roll out two-factor authentication for students? Because I've seen it with some employees. Do you plan to give students that option too?
It's currently available to students
Okay.
at this time.
Okay.
At this time, it's optional, it's not mandatory,
Yeah.
but it is advised. And it's one of the things that we do recommend, and we have a goal to make that more publicly aware to students, that they can go turn this on today, and that we recommend that they do. And anytime that we actually have a student with a concern about their password, or it seems like there's either their account's been compromised, or there's a risk of compromise or something along those lines, we will go in and work with that student to actually enable it for them, or make it particularly mandatory if their account has been problematic or if they're having some concerns. But that is available as of now.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Nielsen?
I'm pretty happy with you. I have watched you make presentations, webcasts or whatever on, being aware of internet security, which I wasn't at one point. And I've actually been one of those people that years ago had my email compromised and stuff happened to me. And I still don't know how I did it, but I know what to do so that doesn't happen again. So in coming next few years, we'll have some new board members here, and I think that make sure on the agenda of new board member orientation that they get some coaching on the security and the use of the campus system.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent idea, and I really believe
I did not.
that-
I learned it the hard way, and there's probably a lot of holes in my knowledge, so if you do hold another session, I will probably attend just to make sure I didn't miss something.
As I said, I'd love to do the security awareness training for all of you, so you can kind of understand how to navigate the risks that you're going to run into out in the wild. And I would love to see new board members that come in be given the training as if they were a new employee, and so they give them the same kind of attention to that awareness, because that's really the most important thing. They say that the biggest risk on any computer network has a heartbeat, right? It's the thing between the chair and the keyboard. And it's not so much, we have all of our protections and everything in place, but it's really the users of the data who run the risk of actually mishandling the data and causing a breach or exposure. So it's really important that everybody is using computer systems with, a lot of knowledge and a little bit of paranoia. Doesn't hurt.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, because we've gotten emails, this is something that is interesting to me and familiar, and I thank you for doing this, but we've gotten emails and it's Robert or it's Marcia, but if you click on the sender, it's like the name is off by one letter, so it's really not them, because anybody can create a Gmail account. So that is good, because we do get a lot of emails from so many different people. And if I get an email, I'll even Google, I'll go into our departments at SBCC to verify that person works at SBCC before I reply, or, just because, I don't know, people are funny. So that's a good point that I think board members should know.
Have a briefing?
Huh?
Have a briefing.
Yeah, well, there's
Yeah.
information that's classified, there's information that's private, and there's information that's public.
Mm-hmm.
And so those levels and those layers are important.
Well, it's an excellent habit you have there, that when you see a message, if it looks like it's from a trusted sender, but what they're asking is, it triggers something in your gut, or why am I getting, if it seems a little off, it really doesn't cost you anything to delete it and contact the person outside of that particular email and say, did you ask me for this? Because actually, emails that ostensibly come from board members or from the president asking for things like the W-2s for all employees, those are actually common phishing attempts where somebody will try to get information. And we've had California community colleges, not ours, but others, actually had had breaches of data because somebody responded to one of those with the information that was being requested. And those can become very expensive breaches very quickly. So it is very important what you're doing to actually validate, is this the legitimate sender? Is this kind of request? Is this the kind of thing I should be sending an email? And whenever in doubt, you can always forward it to our IT help desk or forward it to me, and I'll validate it for you, even if it's to your personal email account. Reach out to me and say, is this legitimate? We're happy to vet that for you and make sure, because it's better to be safe than sorry.
Thank you very much. Very informative. If you could only help us with unwanted phone calls, then we'd really.
Actually, that's part of my training too. I go into what to do about those as well. So
Okay,
I'd
thank
be
you.
happy to give you more information on that.
So if you want to tell us?
Sure. Okay.
It's a separate meeting.
All right. I mean, do you want 2 minutes on it now, or do you?
Sure, why not?
Okay. Caller ID is your friend. You really, honestly, my advice to anybody is don't take a call from a caller ID number that you don't recognize. That's what voicemail's for. It's there for a reason. Because the problem is if somebody is robocalling you or cold calling you, they're calling you because they bought your phone number from some list, right? The second you answer that phone call, even if it's just to hang up, your number now is resellable at a higher value because now that number has been confirmed to be working. Somebody, human, answers that line. And a lot of people are tempted to mess with somebody and, oh, I kept them on the phone and wasted 15 minutes of their time. Well, your phone number is now that much more valuable because not only does it work, not only will somebody answer it, but they'll talk to you. So you really don't want to engage robocallers or telemarketers at all. What you want to do is you want to let them speak to your voicemail and really don't answer calls that you don't recognize. And if there's a number calling and somebody's asking you to call them back, like if they say it's your bank and they want you to call them back, or it's some sort of a security center, or the IRS wants you to call them back, you don't want to return the call to the number that they provide. Look up the actual number for your local IRS office on Google and call them at that number and say, did you call me? Another tip in that is the IRS will never call you or email you. The way that they communicate is via certified mail, and mail fraud is a lot harder to do because the consequences are way more expensive, because mail fraud carries heavy fines and jail time, plus mailing is expensive. But phone stuff, that's costs them almost nothing, and there's a very high return.
Does it do any good to, sometimes when I get calls, I know it's a spam call or however you describe it. Does it do any good to go in and block that number? Does that make any difference? Because it's always a different number every time.
You know what it is? It's good for you from a self-soothing perspective because it makes you feel like you've done something about it.
It does make me feel good, yeah.
The problem is 90% of those times, those numbers are actually being spoofed. They're spoofing caller ID, so that's not the number it really calls from. I've known people who have actually gotten angry phone calls from somebody saying, why do you keep calling me? And they're like, I'm not calling you, somebody's spoofing my number. Because that happens more often than not. So the number that you're playing whack-a-mole is really what you're doing. So yes, you can block the numbers, but ideally, your phone, depending on what kind of phone you have, most of them have this setting where you can send unknown callers to voicemail. So they don't even ring. It goes straight to voicemail, and only your known contacts within the phone will actually ring. And I recommend that setting because, again, voicemail serves you a purpose there. You can always call somebody back. It's legitimate. Otherwise, they're just wasting your time. So yeah, don't answer if you don't have to. Yes?
That sounds like a good setting that I haven't put on the phone, but the phone also has a decline option, and I'm guessing that tells them it's a live number.
Not necessarily. All decline does is if I call you, and normally it would go 4 rings before it hits your voicemail, if you hit decline after 1 ring, what I hear is I hear 1 ring and voicemail. I don't necessarily know that that means you manually declined it. All I know is that your phone could be on Do Not Disturb. I could have maybe not heard the first 3 rings because of the connection. That doesn't really tell me anything. What tells me something is when a human being answers the phone, and because these robocallers, a lot of times what you'll hear is you'll answer the phone and there'll be 2 seconds of silence. You're going, hello, hello. That's how they've determined that it's not a message going, hi, I'm not here. It's a human being trying to validate the call. And so that's how they can actually differentiate between voicemail and human beings. So again, voicemail is your friend, regardless of how they get to voicemail.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So, let me add one thing about, it's not, you're done, okay? But, Jim talked about integrity. Now, there is the issue of quality also. So, we have data integrity, but we still have a data quality issue. And a lot of the data quality issue comes from data definitions. Some things are very, very hard to define or categorize. So as a result, as they say, garbage in, garbage out kind of a thing. So when you try to pull reports, sometimes we run into those kind of things. So that's why a lot of times in our meetings, we spend time arguing, is that the right number? And typically, it arises because of data definitions. A good example is there are sometimes classes where, in the same, especially in art and other areas, 8 to 11, 4 sections of the same class, but in various versions meet. So how it gets recorded can influence the quality of the data as to what is the report you get in terms of how many sections you have to talk. So those are examples of where we still have some work to do in terms of data quality.
Thank you for that additional information. Our next agenda item is 3.3 Grants Report. It looks like Vice President Ralston is going to give us a presentation.
Mine is not a slideshow presentation. So what I've done is provided you with an up-to-date report about our current and most recent grants, and I wanted to frame the context with this little nugget. We submitted a Title V DHSI Part A grant on Monday night at about 8 p.m. after many, many hours of a huge team of people working together to try to pull that around on behalf of our students. That grant is titled, if it gets funded innovatively, Restructuring to Innovate for Student Excellence, RISE as the acronym, Building a Comprehensive Support Network for Student Success. And that's a grant that brought together the instructional side of the English faculty working on AB 705 reforms, student services faculty in both the Transfer Academy program and our general academic counseling, and then our student services areas thinking about financial aid, admissions and records, welcome and outreach, so that we could make sure that we had a more guided entry and support system for students kind of across that first year of experience. And we followed the protocol that was developed 2 years ago to go out for larger grants. And we did it in a really truncated time period. So it's the first time we've used that process since it was developed in 2018, which was to make sure that everybody was notified in advance that we had level interest in something that was larger, disruptive, right? Big grants like that can disrupt the way the institution responds to something. So we wanted to make sure people were kind of in alignment with that. So we followed a form process that was developed for College Planning Council. It went to President's Cabinet, and then we had a large group of people that we made sure had constituent representation to kind of get the heads up. This is something we're interested in. We made sure that our classified professionals were alerted to the fact that we were interested in that. We worked in advance. We're really excited about that with IT so that they had a heads up that there might be technical components with that grant. So it was not the most perfect run. So the federal government opened up a grant that typically opens in March or April. They opened it on December 27th this year, that prime time when most college faculty and staff were really busily reading their emails. So we just felt super ready and on board. So the minute we all got back to campus, we worked through our eligibility pieces and we did some of those. And then we had some complex conversations about what should we do as an institution thinking about faculty involvement in project directorship. And so for the first time, in response to some of the concerns we've heard over the last few years about who gets to step into important roles and working with some of the direction and guidance of the new superintendent president, we'll have an open competition for the role of project director for this position. So we shaped a job description with that. And Dr. Elizabeth Imhoff will be working as the principal investigator, supporting that job search and some of the pieces with that. So we were able to submit the grant with a named person helping do that work, along with activity leads who are faculty in areas that had that responsibility. So I wanted to kind of give you a framework about the way we're trying to do a little more integrated planning and a little more cross-institution analysis of going out. And as we continue to improve our integrated planning pieces, we should be having some of the work that we struggled with in the last month and a half was how do we pull together all the pieces of what we know we need anecdotally and have that all ready to go for the next time a grant opportunity comes. And so we've been working with Rachel Johnson, who is the grants director in the foundation. She was an enormous support for this work. And so she is kind of keeping an archive of things. So the more that we work together across our organizations, I think that will even further strengthen. Which brings me to this update on where we actually are and what we're working with. So there are a number of ways we could have brought data to you this time. So I want to kind of frame what this is. This is the most finite piece about competitive large-level grants at our institution. We hold a number of smaller grants at the institute that the foundation actually oversees for us, so I haven't included those here with you. These are the ones that are actually under our direct purview that we're overseeing, and the number one on the list is a grant that we're really excited about. There's a piece that I should have corrected that's on this where it says we're not certain if the amount is $113,000. It is $113,336. There was a little bit of work when we first posted that to our website where the Chancellor's Office was coming back and asking for a revision of an oversheet, blah, 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 blah. And so we just hadn't caught that back. So that actually is the finite amount. That's a small grant that actually has created a lot of opportunity in a program that runs on a shoestring budget. So $113,000 over 2.5 years is just a little drop in the bucket when we look at our great big budget. But it has actually made a huge amount of opportunity for that program. Noel Gomez has been running that program for over 11 years. And it allowed us to attend the Opportunity Institutes that were sponsored by Stanford. And we walked into that room and Noel was kind of lauded among his peers for the work that he's done. He's considered to be a leader in the state. It's one of the oldest programs in the state, if not the oldest. And it's just been really amazing. That work's also supported by Paloma Arnold, and it's housed in EOPS. We also then have the two big federal grants listed that are currently active, and you've heard about these in different ways because we bring pieces of this work back to you over the last couple of years. The most new grant that we have is the Student Ready Degree Completion for the Flexible Learner. That's a grant that was developed by Jack Friedlander prior to his leaving, along with Paul Jarrell, and worked with a group of faculty and staff who had attended the middle leading from the middle series of conferences and trainings where people had done a project internally to think about, we have a large number of part-time students. What is it that they're at risk when we're working at success factors? How could we support them more effectively? And so they were ready when that grant opportunity came. It made a lot of sense to pull in the part-time student factor. So that's a grant that is still coming into being. It has a focus on creating programming that's effective in the evening, supported by distance education. That's led by Dr. Joshua Ramirez from our psychology department. You tenured him last year, if you might recall. And he's done some very interesting work with that. We're pulling that into institutionalizing elements in enrollment and outreach and trying to create better support structures for the work that he's been engaged in. And then we have the Title III Removing Barriers to STEM program, which has been a very successful professional development grant, support for supplemental instruction, support for faculty, really encouraging our students to exceed expectations in the STEM program. We've included a grant that is, by definition, could be understood to be somewhat categorical. It's a continuing piece of the work that we do in our South Central Regional Consortium work. It's part of the strong workforce pieces, and that's the Perkins funding, sometimes referred to as CTEA funding, and that's money that we manage to help keep our CTE programs really up to date and current in their recency. That's overseen by Luann Swanberg, whom we host as the director for our region here at the college. And then we also have the grant that's under Strong Workforce as the program, which is we get to have a deputy sector navigator. They've actually changed that name to something new and even longer and more cumbersome. And I can't recall it right this second, but it is part of a statewide system where regional areas have a focus on effective work strategies that are regionally specific, and then we competed for somebody who could be that lead person for us. So our area of focus is, and this is the second occurrence of this grant for us, so it's the second time around, somebody focused on global trade initiatives, and so we work with Adeline Polis, whom we hired categorically funded last year, and she's been doing great work with that. And then two that we've recently retired, the Basic Skills and Student Outcomes Transformation Grant was a more recent effort of the State Chancellor's Office to help put resources into curriculum and program transformation in expectation of some of the bigger changes that were coming down. So in 2012, we had the major reform movement on student success. The BSSOT grant was the next level of that grant, really put resources in place for people to be considering acceleration models, remediation strategies, and a series of changes around assessment and placement that ended just minutes after AB 705 passed. And so that had provided opportunity for our faculty in English, math, and ESL to do some preliminary work that they pulled into their efforts with AB 705. Without that grant, we would have been far behind the 8 ball on being able to do that effort to really consolidate what faculty wanted to do to move forward. And then we closed up this year. The final report's being submitted on March 6th. The Title V iPath to Success, which was a collaborative federal grant that we worked with CSU Channel Islands. And that was a grant really targeting student movement between our institution and CSU CI. Created some really great relationship pieces, as well as some professional development opportunities to be really thinking about how to prepare students in that work.
Questions? Whoa.
Trustee Abud. Just a quick one. It's not about the grants that we have on this list, but maybe it was not on this list because you said these are the major grants. But when I was at the community college conference a month ago, one of the things they were talking about was this mental health grant that was new from the chancellor's office. Is that something we've applied for? Because I've seen other trustees I know, celebrate getting it on their district.
Certainly. So we did get the mental health grant, and we've been working really actively with that. You might remember in September, we brought a speaker to campus, was actually hosted downtown at a theater on preventing suicide by talking about his own experiences. I've just lost his name. That was one of the pieces that was funded. Some of the other work that we've done lately has been directed professional development for our folks in the Student Health Center, the WELL, and personal counseling. So it's created a series of opportunities for our staff to get a little bit stronger and to do some pulling in of other resources. It's small. It's a little bit online with the transitions grant. It's a little smaller than that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Thank you.
I made the cutoff at 100.
Okay.
Marcia?
Thank you, Pamela. This is really helpful information. Could you talk a little bit more about how we reconcile the system where we get these grants? And by the way, tell us how much this new one is for.
The new one, that if we were awarded for everything we asked for, it would be $600,000 a year for 5 years. So a $3 million grant.
Okay. So I'm looking at the column for current allocations, and the ones that are going to disappear sometime in 2021 are roughly $3.1 million. And that's restricted money.
Yes.
The question is, we are putting together these wonderful efforts to build structures and pathways and success, and then the grant ends.
Yes.
And so can you talk a little bit more about how we make that transition when we no longer have the grant and cannot necessarily afford to pay for what we have been doing at the level at which we've been doing it?
So I'm going to say several positive things about the student-centered funding formula, which I felt more positive about last week, and I'm working through some challenges with how I feel about it right now. So bear in mind, in concept, the student-centered funding formula is supposed to be designed to actually allocate in order to do the kind of work that a lot of these grants actually think about. So once we actually cross over the hurdle into that new worldview, we should only be designing grants that actually look like they can be sustained by increased apportionment from the state. So the grant that we currently wrote, that maybe we will get funded in, is actually designed that if we're successful in creating an increased number of students who transfer, that would actually increase our allocation from the state on that metric that says more students need to transfer. How are you tracking that? That should increase revenues, and that's part of what institutionalization should look like. So there are component parts of any grant that are a little experimental, where you're trying something out and you think, this is risky, this might or might not work. If that's successful, we should be designing grants to be able to incorporate that back into the institutional system. There are times when something really brilliant is developed, but it winds up serving too small a number of students, and so over time that's difficult to maintain institutionally. That's the hardest part about how to scale up from something that is a smaller set of concerns that have been addressed by. It always sounds like $3 million over 5 years is a lot of money. It's actually not a lot of money. And when we got together as a big group to think about how we would change all of these issues around student services, guided pathways, and AB 705, we wound up at the start at $2 million over what we could have won in the grant. So we spent a long time walking back through how to cut $2 million of the things that we really wanted. So $3 million's actually pretty tiny, and we should be institutionalizing those roles or thinking about roles that we could be expanding by the opportunity with a grant. So part of it is the intentionality at the front end. The other part is writing the grant to understand that you should be working over the 5 years to either be decreasing the grant costs and increasing the general fund costs so that you're planning for that. This grant, we actually wrote in an endowment, which is the first time that we've agreed with the foundation to be able to create something to provide resources over time. So we're setting aside a portion of the grant each year for 5 years, and then will be matched by the foundation, which can create another bit of transitional time period. So the relationship that we have with the foundation, its interest in the promise being sustained and connected more fully, lined up with this grant proposal. So they were excited and interested in that. We're really grateful for their support. So it's a little bit about the pre-planning, asking for things that you think you can actually manage to institutionalize if they become viable. Making sure that inside the grant construction itself that you're planning ahead for what that incorporation looks like. And then this opportunity to do endowment really, it's just fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands raised, so
I just wanted to-
thanks again.
I
Nope.
just want to comment on I know Joshua's, the grant he's overseeing, it's not over yet, but it's, so we had a presentation about a year and a half ago, SBCC night, right? So is it going as planned, the strategies, or how's that going?
It's been a little more challenging.
Yeah.
Working to really bring back the notion of the evening college, which has been part of the way it's been focused, is working to figure out how to get the people who are most likely to participate in that program knowledgeable and aware. And so he's just hitting critical mass this year. That first year of ramp up was a kind of a slog and a learning opportunity institutionally. We held him back in some ways over concerns about hiring people with categorical funds. We've made it a little more difficult, so we're working through a couple of those pieces. But in general, we are stronger now for part-time students in a particular cohort around a time sense, and it revealed some real strategies and challenges that educational programs needs to be thinking about. And so as we work on our guided pathways, we're really thinking about how to make sure the guided pathways plan for part-time students as well as for full-time students. And we're thinking about distance education kind of ate evening courses lunch over the last 15 years. My parents went to college at night. And there was a huge, robust program, and we had one here. And so the intentionality behind planning for a night college is really different than kind of the ad hoc process that Distance Edge has gone through. And so it's given us an opportunity to see where some of those weaknesses and challenges have been. And we're working on some of those components as a part of our enrollment management that we do inside the Dean's Work in Ed programs. So his is actually the kind of grant that's pushed us through some pilot issues and helped us reveal some of the challenges. So it's going to be hugely successful, but we need to give him a little more support and a little more structure.
Yeah, and I'm behind him 100%. I think
it's
we
great.
all are.
It's a great program.
Yeah, I mean, and I've talked to him. I think his passion is great. I think he's you need the money and the right person, and he seems like he's the right person.
And he's both. He's both. So we're just at the point of being able to reconcile some of the challenges. And some of those are institutional, which is part of what developing NHSI, the DHSI piece is. If you're really rethinking how an institution serves Hispanic students, part-time students, low-income students, there are some real redesign components that need to be put into play.
Yeah, I was here last night because I was at the Atkins, Madhuri Sharma's guest lecture last night, and so I was reminded of the adult population that Marcia was talking about with enrollment last night, and it is a different demographic. Latino, Hispanic males, some of my dad's. I see kids in the parking lot, and mom getting dropped off, and so I was walking around. I didn't make it to the lecture until much later because I was running into people, and so I think there is a lot of opportunity for that.
So too.
But so the reality is too, we have to schedule. So we can't be Tuesday, Thursday college from 9 to 1.
No.
So I think that that's also going to be, and then student services, we can't shut down because we all want to go home at 4. And so it just is, I realize that this is a big undertaking, but if we're really going to service our community in the way that we envision, there's a lot of things that need to change. Because I just was walking around for a while thinking, oh, wow, I know I'm in my dual enrollment world because I hang around teenagers every day, but being here at night is a completely different feeling.
Right.
And for me, that's equally as important because you change the trajectory of a household with the adults becoming more literate. That child's going to enter school with the thousands of words that he or she needs to be a successful reader.
Yes. You know that as a reading teacher, right?
I do.
You know those numbers are immediate.
So, so thank you, but I think that, what we can do to help support that, I mean, they're all important, and certainly Noel's work, my gosh.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the nice thing is if you step back, it's a little hard because we're in the midst of so much change and transformation,
Yeah.
but if you take 2 steps back and look at all of these together, you can see how integrated all of these efforts are. This is all Guided Pathways work. So thinking about our evening programming and scheduling is Guided Pathways work. Thinking about how dual enrollment students come in via CTE-led pathways with strong workforce funding. We could talk about the whole cool thing that K-12 could be doing right now. All of that is the same project. It's just an enormous project. And so depending on which angle you're coming from to take a bite of it. It's all of those. And I think we're working more effectively to see the overlaps and trying to really focus in those areas.
And then my last point was, in terms of identifying the different strategies, I spent a lot of time on the Excelencia website since we were over in Buellton, and I'd like to see, I mean, since money is not, I mean, there is a finite amount of money, and if we get a grant, and, because we envision, I guess, the grant doesn't necessarily, does it supplant or supplement? Sometimes it's just a whole other thing on its own, right?
So usually a grant like this is designed to be its own thing unto itself because it has a very directed focus. And so you should be looking for areas where you've noticed that you're weak, that there are a series of gaps, there's some unmet need that this mechanism can help you respond to. You can supplant with grants like this and move some things around because it's not state categorical money. It is designed to amplify. So for schools that have just realized that they've hit the designation of being Hispanic serving, they're thinking about this in terms of enrollment. What number of students are they serving? We're at a point in our history where we're thinking about how are we serving the students we have. In January, we moved over on the CLIC to 40% HSI. So we have 40% of our student population that's Latinx. That's a significant number, and we should really be considering how we approach almost everything that we do. So part of the grant effort that we described going forward with RISE is how are we working with families? What's our language interaction around financial aid? What does financial literacy look like? What do those opportunities look like? So that we're seeing kind of a whole community approach. And that's transformative. So you're not just thinking about, oh, we got 200 more Latinx students, so now we're eligible for a grant. Which some districts in our state are really thinking about it from that way. This is really about how do you get into the service element of being an HSI, and it's moving. And over the last 10 years, the work that faculty and managers and staff have done here has really positioned us well to do that.
And I think that was the whole thing with the Seal of Excelencia, and Channel Islands just got it last year. So I think for them to be, and I know we applied, Dr. Benjamin, we worked with her, and she emailed Sarita, and then Dr. Goswami is going to follow up. But I don't know, I think that's just, for me, we've talked.
We looked at some of their resources while we were thinking through this grant.
Yeah, this bigger picture stuff.
Yeah.
Well, amazing, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So our next item is 3.4, strategic directions. And I think we're going to...
So this is an item that you have seen before.
Yes.
And we need to, as a district, have some sort of a goals adopted so that some of our work for accreditation and things like that can move ahead for next year. So my plan is to put this or a revised version of that in the agenda for the March board meeting. So this is your opportunity kind of to talk about this document and observe or comment and.
Any comments? Questions?
I do.
Trustee Croninger.
I know a lot of work went into what we're looking at here, but I also have the feeling that we were a bit rushed in putting it together. And I looked at some of the other colleges and what they're doing with their strategic plan, and I was particularly drawn to the strategic plan at College of the Canyons. And I would hope that we would find a way to move in the direction that they took. The direction, they've been doing strategic plans for years, but what they did with their most recent strategic plan was they said, first of all, 3 items, not a long list. And those items aren't necessarily our items, obviously, but they took 3 primary goals. They made them measurable objectives so that you can tell whether you are achieving this plan. And their discussion was deeply informed by background information about the community, about the directions and demographics, about the trends for high school students, the age groups that are coming in terms of demographics, the job trends in the community. They had a very long laundry list of appendices that fed into this plan that was the context for it. And I really feel like we're missing out when we don't do that kind of analysis, when we don't do a scan of our situation. And so the process as well, they started out with, I think, really basic, these 3 principles that at the board level and consistent with the mission, the vision, and values. And then they took this information about the community scan and the demographics and the economics and all of that sort of stuff and fed it into and then discussed. And came up, as I said, with measurable objectives. And I'm very much in favor of doing that and not just coming up with a sentence which sounds good, but there's no way you're going to tell whether you achieved it in any measurable way. So just for an example, I wanted to give folks copies, and I can give to Angie and you can post. And I have a couple extras, but here's one of their appendices. It's age of residence. And they're looking at what's predicted. And they're saying, here's these blocks of residents and how many of them are going to increase over the next 2018 to 2023, and by what percent. And based on that knowledge, their plan reflects the fact that really they should be targeting age 25 and older, because the community will become older in greater proportion than the younger members of the community will grow. So these are, like, to me, critical, factual pieces of information that should inform a strategic plan. I think our budget issues, our enrollment issues are clearly part of what we need to include in this plan, whatever that small number of goals turns out to be. But we're not going to succeed if we just sort of think with our gut and don't look at the data. I think we have to reflect that kind of data. So that's my suggestion. I know you've got accreditation things going on, and I know we've got reasons to perhaps deal with what we've got, but I am concerned that we give it a serious relook, if not the first look, in this context with a lot more information and a lot more strategic thinking. To me, what we have here comes off more as, particularly the parts about we're going to update various plans. Of course we're going to update those plans. That's our administrative imperative, that we would have these plans and we would regularly update them. It's not strategic to me. What's strategic is focusing on a narrow set of objectives and measuring our success getting there.
So you'd like to start over?
Well, if I had the time, I would. I mean, I would say let's talk about the really big picture, then, and simultaneously get that environmental scan. Some colleges have combined that with a strengths and weaknesses analysis, and then come up with their plan. But I don't know, from an administrative point of view, whether we have time to do that. And obviously, it's shared governance, participatory for the college. It's just that it helps. We did it so quickly before, we didn't have that information, and I feel like we would really benefit.
Somebody could refresh my memory, but I believe this document did go through
It did.
discussion.
It did.
Yes.
It didn't come to us until it was done.
Right.
But it was, I see no indication that true background evaluation that is reflected in College of the Canyons. I mean, if you just look at their various appendices, actual and projected population of the community, age of residents, educational attainment, pipeline to higher education, enrollment projections with the high schools, various programs, employment by sectors, enrollment projection, internal factors and external factors, enrollment and projection, historical changes in ethnic composition, tuition waiver changes, which were quite dramatic, concurrent enrollment, dual enrollment, transfers, participation rates, you know, the whole direction of job trends, all of those things they looked at.
Trustee.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is there something that's missing? I mean, I think there are two categories of activities here. One is the methodology. I kind of like the methodology that you're suggesting. The other has to do with the substance, and I'm wondering, I mean, we could probably spend all year on something, on one item, and I don't think we should. Is there something that's missing from the list that has been presented to us that you think should be included?
It's not so much missing. Well, focus would be what was missing, I think. They narrowed down the focus to specific measurable goals, and we don't have much of that.
Right.
We really
the
don't.
methodology,
You know,
the approach is
improve.
very different.
No, I mean, they're literally, the list that we have under the categories of the major goals are not anything like their list, because there is no measurable element to it.
I just don't know how we can approach this unless we do what Robert suggests, is to start all over.
Well, I'm suggesting, and I'm not saying exactly when that has to happen, but I am saying that is a strategic plan in my mind. This is more of a list of things we'd like to accomplish, but no particular way to measure it.
Could we live with this for this year? Or can we live with this for this year?
I think that sort of analysis is up to Dr. Goswami, how he wants to handle or recommend to us to handle that.
Because there's an accreditation deadline and sort of sequence of events that need to take place for.
So I'm not looking at this as a strategic plan. It's a strategic direction in absence of a plan. Our last full-blown strategic plan, I think, either expired or is about to expire. No. And so I can only surmise, but because of all the transition that was going on, that the work that needed to happen to redesign or do the strategic plan did not happen. Okay, so that's why the very first item here is in strategic direction is develop a strategic plan. Okay. So I will go a step further than that. In that we need to have a kind of a board goals. So far you have board goals for the board, but what is the board goals for the institution? So you need to have some conversations about now very broad goals. These are not necessarily measurable or anything of that sort, but that we are responsive to the community's emerging educational needs. So that gives us direction for the strategic plan. That has to be a component of the things that we do. So it'll be helpful at some point in time to have broad board goals for the institution, What do you like to see the institution to be in 2027? You know, what will the student experience be when we're in 2027 or 2030?
Yeah.
Then that gives the framework to the administration and the constituents. Okay, now given that, here's what the data we have in terms of our demographics and our changing, structures, and here's what we're going to put in place strategically. And so I see that work to be happening next year. But in the meantime, our employees have to have some goals in terms of what they want to do, in terms of accomplishments and things like that. So this basically gives us a roadmap that until that happens, here are some of the things we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee Nelson.
Interesting points brought up on this topic. I've read through these. They're all pretty general. Each one is valid, and some people have put some real thought into it. I perceive the difference between what Trustee Croninger was presenting and what we have, and I can see the difference, but I perceive it as being one of in presentation and a slight difference in original approach to how you're going to make a strategic plan. I believe, and it's been shown to me, demonstrated over and over again in the time I've been here, that our staff makes pretty good use of demographics when they go to forecast, looking at future enrollment, although that's been off, but not because they didn't look at the local demographics. I think a slightly different approach in doing this, to put in some items that it would be nice to move this scale, which is now here, to somewhere else, and then we could measure it. I don't think that, to do that, I don't think we have to destroy or take away anything that's here or change it. In fact, there's a lot here, an awful lot, and very generalized. We just saw this recently, first time. It's been around, and now I don't know what deadlines are associated with this. And actually, I don't have anything bad to say about this at all. At least it's something you can go look at, and it shows all the concerns we have and what we think we need to do. At least there's something written down to look at. So unless you'd like to add some or replace some items with things that are quantifiable, I'm all for that if we have the time, but can't we contribute to this on a quarterly basis or as we go along and we look at new approaches or things? I'm not the administrator, and I don't want to get in the weeds and do our president's job for him. Whatever, I'll accept any guidance he has. I think it's a matter of perspective. And how transparent do we need to be? Do we need to put in those numbers? Or can we relate, if they relate to something that we could look up, here's what the numbers were then, here's what they are now, how did we do? I think we could still do that on these topics to a certain extent and see if we've made any progress. So that's my 2 cents worth. I'm not concerned about super delaying this or delaying this. I think it's important to have something here that people can look at and say, we need to address these issues. So I'm not going to do your job for you. It's not my place to get in the weeds with you. Thank you.
I mean, these are all points well taken, but again, I'll stress that this is not the strategic plan.
Okay.
So ultimately, a strategic plan will have, measurable goals and metrics and all of those things associated. But it will pick up from these things, some of these things. And we might have to highlight a few things to be more strategic than some of the other things. But yeah. I have no quarrel with some of the things that are in here. But again, going back to your point that at some point in time we have to attach some objectivity in terms of measurable goals. I'll probably shy away from making everything so measurable that you shy away from some of the very important things, like, to me, for us to move ahead, I think the improvement of the campus climate is probably a prerequisite. So there are hardly anything measurable there, but because there is something not measurable, we should not shy away from that either.
So what I hear, kind of distilling what everybody has said, I think, I agree with Marcia's approach in terms of metrics. It's always good to have metrics to measure how you're performing, but there's no reason, it seems to me there's no reason we can't pursue your kind of analysis in addition to adopting our strategic directions and goals. It seems like we can do both. And I know this is critically important for accreditation purposes.
I'm not opposed to doing both in the sense that I think this, I'm hearing you say this is kind of where we are now, and we want to do the strategic plan. What I'm trying to talk about so much is when we do a strategic plan, that it be much more comprehensive and in some respects specific. You are right that some things that may be too important to put in there, that need to go in there, are not easily measured. Their choices were access, engagement, and success. Those were their three choices for goals. And then for an example, under access, they said increase the adult participation 25 years and older rate by 1% each year from 2018-19 to 2021-22. That's specific and measurable. That's an example. And they have a number of other ones. Increase incarcerated FTES from 20 to 57 over that time period. That kind of specific goal, which I think does give you a good metric, and you can revisit it every year and say, is this working? Maybe I didn't make the right choice. Maybe I should have gone for more, whatever.
Trustee Parker?
Thank you. As somebody who's relatively new on the board, I had assumed that this was not a strategic plan, that this was a list of priorities essentially required by the state in some way. And what I could see is that it's an excerpt from the Educational Master Plan. And I don't know how those are related. I don't know if we're required to update this. I don't know how often the Educational Master Plan has to be updated. The last one that I could see was 2018. And essentially an earlier version of this is tucked in there. And so I don't quite understand what the state is requiring.
So
why,
it is not a state requirement. It is more of, we got to demonstrate that we have effective institutional planning.
Gotcha.
Okay. And our processes are geared towards effective planning. And to be able to plan for next year and do what and prioritize things for next year, because that'll guide the budget also.
Yes.
Okay. So what are we shooting for? Okay. So this basically provides us kind of an umbrella that here's what are some of the things we're shooting for, and then our plans will follow. The yearly plans will follow. And the budget priorities will follow some of these things.
And presumably, whenever the Educational Master Plan is updated again,
Yes.
this piece of it would be tucked back in there the way it has been in the past. And then the strategic plan process, which it seems like we need to go through, is something a little bit separate. But then it would be linked.
I will envision that once you have an Educational Master Plan, which is a much longer time horizon, like 10 years, 12 years, 15 years horizon, the strategic plan is more like 4 or 5 years. What will happen is that you'll have annual plans under it. So
something like this would get shortened down.
So the strategic plan, we'll have, here are the 7 things we want to accomplish, and these things in year 1 and 2, and these things will start in year 2 and go to year 5. So it'll boil down to this. These will become yearly plans.
Yeah, it's also my understanding that the state does require an educational master plan, and certain elements of it we actually have not addressed, and so we should update it, and that's in our, to-do list.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, Dr. Goswami, and I'm comfortable with that. I see what you're saying, Marcia. I mean, we've talked about, moving to ends policies versus just, and getting everybody on what we want to see, and every board meeting being tied to that. The reality is, I think, I give everybody grace because we've all been caught up in other things than this. So this is where we are now, and what we envision, and we've always talked about wanting to move towards a culture of having ends policies, not looking at something so measurable that's like a SMART goal that's going to tie up the president and the rest of the institution, because we said, oh, you will outreach by having a beach party, and oh gosh, we're not having beach parties, so now we didn't make it. So that I think I'm comfortable going with what's here, what's present. I certainly like the whole streamlining the application or the enrollment as someone that's tried to apply here to the college. The only thing I would add, and maybe we just email the little wordsmithing, 6.5 would just need to get rewarded because that's no longer in our mission, the foster global responsibility. We don't have that. So I guess just little things like that, we send them over.
Yeah,
Maybe
send them over
we'll
to-
just send them over to Angie as a draft. Yeah, so I'm comfortable with this, and then there's just a couple little things that I think can be added or looked at. So.
Anybody else? Okay. I think we can move on to item 3.6, which is ombuds person. And let me just say by way of background that I think over the last almost 2 years now, shortly after I joined I joined the board about 2 years ago. And it was shortly after that we had some serious issues revolving around gender equity. Following that, we had some issues revolving around racial matters. We've had concerns in general about complaints about matters happening on campus that need to be addressed and not being addressed in a timely fashion, and we've spent time looking at those matters. But out of all that came an idea that I credit Trustee Hasland for bringing up, and that is the idea of having an ombuds person to help address and help deal with complaints. And I know that Dr. Goswami also has ideas on the subject, but over the last 9 months, this idea kind of got set aside, I think, as we were hiring an interim president and hiring a new president, permanent president. So I think we need to come around and decide whether we want to move forward or not on this. So that's why it's on the agenda this evening. And I guess I'd like to start with Dr. Hasland and just review for us what your concept was.
The rationale stems from, at least my observation, that during times of turmoil, the office of the president of the college is consumed by the turmoil. But the president of the college has a multiplicity of things that they're supposed to do. And so the president's mind cannot be focused on one single item, no matter how serious it is, because there's another one just waiting back at the office. And so the idea of an ombudsperson is really Scandinavian in origin, where they have experimented, particularly in Norway, with hiring someone whose principal skill is that of listening and being able to offer suggestions for resolution, to dispassionately appeal to whoever needs to be appealed to fix whatever has gone wrong. To be an independent source of conflict management. Conflict resolution would be preferable, but sometimes you just manage it. And that in the long run, it's a huge cost saver in that the institutional CEO is not consumed by that particular conflict. So one of the things we did to get a handle on how effective this might be was to take a field trip to the university, where we met with the chancellor and a number of people who represented different offices, all of whom had had interaction with the university ombudsperson. It was a very enlightening conversation, and I remember at one point I asked the chancellor directly, can you think of any downside to having an ombudsperson? And he looked me straight in the eye and said, I cannot think of one. So he was obviously of the view that having an ombudsperson on campus to deal with not a particular, but the issues as they come up, that there is a sense of trust in this person, that this person will actually listen fully to your concerns and be able to translate those concerns to the authorities that need to hear in a way that leads to resolution. And I guess my long-range concern about it has to do with preserving the time of the institutional CEO to do the job that he or she was hired to do, and not to be waylaid by the crisis of the moment.
So, Dr. Goswami, we're hearing an offer to try to ease the burden on your office. So I guess I'd like to hear your reaction or thoughts on.
Trustee Nelson wants to chime in also.
We'll go to Trustee
He never
Nelson.
sees my hand. I guess I got to stand up and do this. We had a presentation about a year ago that we were going to have someone come and actually talk to us, and that got interrupted. But we did have a report to look through. And most of us should know what an ombudsman really is and does. Regardless of that, I have 2 points about this. A, we're operating under a pretty harsh budget deficit. B, so we need to be very careful how we spend money, extremely careful, because we're spending too much. Okay, but the other point, this is the way I feel. I don't know if you'll agree, anybody else will agree with me or not. But I think that this decision is more of our president's decision. It's an administrative, I view it like it's the administrator's choice how he sets up how many VPs he needs, what they need to have be a vice president of, and how it's organized, because he's the one that's responsible to us. It's not our job to do that. The way, and I heard what you say, and I don't really disagree with you, it doesn't fit, I don't feel, because if we were to set up and say, okay, you're going to have an ombudsman, and this is for your own good, whether he wants one or not, and whether our budget can afford it or not, I don't think that's why the Board of Trustees is here. To have a discussion about it and to be open about it and suggest is one thing. I don't think that it's our place to take any official action on doing that. And here's the third point I'd like to make. Just like there are 5 functions of management, and some people might say there's 6 or 7, and some people may say there's only 4. But the functions of what Trustee Haslam said about an ombudsman, which we should all know because we had that report about a year ago. Those functions are already being done. They're being carried out, however excellently or however poorly. those functions are addressed in another way under an organizational structure that should be the purview of the president. And the president's strengths or weaknesses, and what kind of strengths he needs to surround himself with. If he needs that, I don't think that we should tell him, because I certainly can't stand in his shoes. And we hired someone with some experience, so he probably knows what he needs. I also have noticed, by watching things going on in the last few months and what we've had to deal with in closed sessions, it seems, and recent things, it seems that we have a staff here on campus that's actually listening when people make complaints and carrying them forward and talking and following up. Maybe that, and it's apparent that a couple of years ago that was not happening, in all cases. And so I think in some ways we've addressed it already. So these are our concerns as a Board of Trustees. And we kind of just like to, as one trustee, would just like to hear from Dr. Goswami tell us what he thinks he needs as he gets more comfortable and more ingrained. I guess that's enough
Could I respond to?
Yes,
No,
I
you
would.
can't. I'm right and you're wrong, no matter what.
I just want to say one thing, and that is, with your last point, I think is a very important point, that there has been, I think, significant improvements and changes in how we handle, how the institution handles complaints and various controversies.
Well, thank you, but I thought all my points were highly valid.
That was the most valuable. Okay, Dr. Haslund.
I just wanted to agree with you on one point, and that is ultimately, I would not make a proposal that would not be in keeping with the CEO's preference.
Okay.
But in terms of the point you raise on cost, yes, it will cost us a salary to hire somebody who is going to be serving in this position. But I would argue that that's probably a smaller cost than that incurred by not having someone who could be turned to under these unique circumstances. You could allay or maybe ascribe a portion of the CEO's salary to that's not being used effectively because he's scattered with having to deal with this thing in the first place, in the first instance. The president ultimately would have a decision to make based on the ombudsperson's recommendation. That is not taken away. It is essentially a time saver for the president. And that, I think, will result in long-term cost savings. And the time to make the decision about whether to have an ombudsperson is not when you have a crisis. It's before you have a crisis.
Trustee Parker.
Thank you. And yes, obviously, I would not want to move forward without hearing Dr. Goswami's, having his input and his recommendation in the long run. Just for our conversation tonight, I would say that absolutely I support the idea of having an ombuds on campus. I was reading, there was a Chronicle of Higher Ed article that came out last summer that was talking about the troubleshooter on campus, the way institutions are set up to bring a huge variety of opinions, ideas, and backgrounds. That's the beauty of the institution, but it also makes it really easy for misunderstandings and conflict to arise. And the role of the ombudsperson really can make a huge difference in the atmosphere, productivity, the way people feel about their work, the way students feel heard. To me, we absolutely should have one. The question is, can we afford one right now? And that's a question. But I absolutely agree that this is not something that you can wait until the next emergency. It will come. It will come, even though, yes, obviously we have staff that are really stepping it up in terms of the way they're responding. We'll have a crisis again. Will we be ready for it? In concept, in theory, I think it's a great idea. I would love to move forward. I really would love to give Dr. Goswami time to reflect on it and to take a look at our budget, which we know is in a bad way.
Trustee Croninger.
Well, I was going to suggest we hear from Dr. Goswami before I made comments, but I do have some comments.
Trustee Abood.
I think I'd echo what's been said already, that I support the idea. It's something that our students and faculty have said they also would like to see, but I also would like to see what the president wants to recommend. But overall, this is something that is successful at UCSB and other institutions, and it sounds like something people here want. So I support the idea, but yeah, want to hear what you have to say.
I mean, I have seen ombudsperson function in many institutions. What I'm thinking about is the context in which we are going to introduce this person. It is possible that we will introduce this person because of the reason that our system is broken, then if somebody else is needed to kind of, engender trust in the system. To me, that would be a bad thing to do, because we want people to have fundamental trust in our processes to work. Once we have fundamental trust that, yes, this is an institution where complaints are taken seriously, they're processed and resolved in a thoughtful way, then the ombudsperson becomes an additional service to the employees and students. And that's when the ombudsperson role is most effective, where they're not becoming a process to validate whether our systems work or not. That's given, systems work, but here it is additional person to kind of to make things happen easier. So when we get to that point, I have no problem with an ombudsperson, and I've also seen some trends in which there are multiple ombudspersons, and the reason being that so and so may not feel comfortable talking to so and so or whatever. And that's why one of the things, even though I'm not calling it ombudsperson and things like that, as I kind of pointed all the racially and Title IX kind of complaints to Linda to be the intake person, I would like to get to the point where we have multiple Lindas in various parts of the campus, so that you can go to whoever it is that you want to, that you feel comfortable with, and who's trained to walk you through the process. I think the greatest need right now is presumably for a lot of people to kind of they're observing something. Do I really have to file a formal complaint, or do I just raise the issue, or is it something a formal complaint, or is it something if I just tell somebody it's taken care of? So we have a lot of these things to take care of at the institution right now. So immediately, whether we go to ombudsperson model or not, probably in the next year sometime we'll probably end up training multiple people. They'll still be doing their regular job, but this will be in addition to that. Now somebody can approach you with something as an interim measure, because I still realize that that budget is becoming more difficult. In fact, as I have reported to you, This year, we're going to get $3 million less. And it's kind of very funny to say that because we are 6, 7 months, 8 months into the year, and now the state is telling us this is exactly how much money you get. So it's a very difficult situation for the institution to manage. So if we don't have trust in the systems, there is high probability that whoever the ombudsperson is may be labeled as, okay, so you're the administration's spy. So it is not a guarantee that people will accept that person, okay, you are independent, free, whatever it is, no, and we can trust you. So I think we have to build institutional trust in our systems and processes first, and then introduce this person to kind of as an additional layer of help to people. So more than likely, I will kind of ease into it by doing some of these stopgap measures in terms of various people in roles to serve as intake persons, and then I'm pretty comfortable that that will be successful, and that will make the case, a business case, that we should really have a full-time person.
It's good to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm not convinced, but I see the point. The mitigating point is that as the president of the college, you have a myriad of things to do each and every hour during the day, and you simply don't have the time to focus on one issue.
I understand that, yes.
But I agree with the point that you make. I think trust is the essential ingredient in frankly, whether the system can work with or without an ombudsperson. I mean, unless we have a sense of trust in the institution, we're starting at the wrong place. So I agree. It's a critical system. I don't have any objection to trying alternatives. I mean, just the essential ingredient is having somebody that people can go to, with whom they feel safe, and who they believe will clearly and carefully listen. I think some of the disputes that we've had on campus have come about because the people who felt aggrieved felt they were not heard. We cannot anticipate different results if we don't have somebody that you can go to and trust that you're going to be heard. And to some extent, I get back to the costs. I know it's going to be costly, but isn't it more costly to consume the president in some manner? But I would defer to, having made this argument, I would completely defer to what you would want and what you would feel comfortable with.
Trustee Croninger.
Well, I think that Dr. Goswami's approach makes sense to me. I think originally when we talked about this, we did have a proposal from an outside firm to do this, and the price tag was about $300,000 a year, and it only addressed employee complaints. It did not address student complaints. So if you add in students, which I think is a fair thing to do, you're really getting up there. So I become concerned about the budget, and I become concerned that it's a wonderful thing, and yet there are many wonderful things that we wish we could do and we can't afford. So when we add one on, we're taking some others off. So I feel like there is a special talent here. Part of the issue before was it was an outside entity. And the idea was to keep that person separate from the administration to enhance the trust factor. They're not, hired or fired in some sense, or at least not directly under the supervision of the administration. I think it is better to have the trust building, and it's a talent. I mean, it's a talent to be good at that. And if we can identify people who are here already who can serve that with training, then it becomes far less of a budget problem.
I mean, Trustee Haslam, one of the things that other institutions or presidents and chancellors have done is, in fact, there is almost like a badge of honor among many presidents that I have a chief of staff. Now, I can tell you, I would rather have an ombudsman first before I do a chief of staff. Okay.
I would as well, because I know who the chief of staff works for, and that negates that, a certain amount of that element of trust.
And the thing is, issue management, even though there are multiple issues that might crop at various points in time, at least to me, the way I operate or whatever is not that time consuming, even though there are multiple issues. But relationship management, yes, it's always time consuming. And the kind of person you're describing is basically more of that kind. So I understand, completely. But again, feel that the prerequisite for any of those things to happen is basically to have institutional trust in systems. Because we cannot bring in additional proxy to build up trust in the institution. We'll probably set this person up for failure.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, though, that having the ombudsperson helps build the trust, too, because especially if that's something people on campus have been saying they feel like they'd like to have. But in terms of the price, $300,000 is pretty high, and if we add students, that would get way higher. I think that was just one quote, and so maybe what I'd like to see is an RFP put out to see what kinds of proposals come to us. If someone can offer us a better price for a good service, that'd be interesting to know what it looks like.
I think I saw UCSB's job last year, and I think it was $85,000.
For their job posting?
Mm-hmm. It was coincident. I just Googled it. They obviously hired someone because it's not on there, and I went on the UCSB to see if it was still there. After our presentation, coincidentally, I saw one at UCSB. First, I want to say thank you for trusting us to have this conversation with you. I think it's pretty cool that you knew what you were thinking, and yet you still allowed the board chair to work to put this on the agenda. Because you could have been like, no, I don't want an ombudsperson, it's not the right time, but you allowed this conversation to happen openly, so I think that's pretty awesome. So I trust you for trusting us, and I just think that more trust builds that way. To the cost factor, at first I was like, wait, is this going to be one more layer, and how effective is it going to be? We're already spending a lot of money on a whole HR department, and so I do like the fact that we would build on having people feel comfortable with the folks who are already paying hundreds of thousands of dollars when we add up that whole department. So then if we just bring someone on, and then you sort of negate the fact that we're paying all this money, and so is this magical person all of a sudden going to be the perfect end all, so.
Good argument. I mean, I agree with you.
So I think, that just made me think of that when you brought up the whole trust thing, and it is, because I know I react differently to people I don't trust. I do things for people that I do trust, or you're willing to do things. I work in education, so your union, your contract, but you trust your colleagues, your principal, you're going to, and then you see the times when it's like, oh, well, no, it says it in my contract. And you know that's a relational trust thing when people are able to read their contract and say, oh, I can do this or I can do that. And that goes in anything that we do. So I think relationships and trust is really what is at the heart here, because we can hire 20 people, but if I don't feel comfortable calling up Peter, it's not going to work. So.
Agree. Trustee Nelson.
Yeah, I omitted this before because I thought I was getting long-winded, but several of my fellow trustees have compared, us to UCSB and having an ombudsman and how that works. I think that if you're going to have an ombudsman, I think you should look at what UCSB is spending, what that costs them, divide it by the number of students and the amount of faculty that the ombudsman serves, and then look at the size of our institution, and maybe try to find some way to fill the need for the same amount of, like, per capita dollars, for instance. Because to put someone on in the role of something that serves, 4 or 5 times the population, the per capita cost here is going to be way higher. And so we maybe have to attack that problem in a different way. So that's why I said what I said about, I think it's Dr. Goswami's option, which way he wants to go. And I'm sure he's smart enough to look at other institutions and how they're doing it, and he knows what it is. So if he wants us to be involved, I'm all for it, but until he asks us to be involved, I'm not for it. Thank you.
This has been a good discussion. Any other comments before we move on? So our next item is, before I go on, is there anything else you wanted to say?
The audit and finance.
Okay. So the next item, 3.7, is Audit Finance Committee, and this is on the agenda as a follow-up to discussions we had in December. I think at Dr. Benjamin's last meeting with us, she discussed the concept of adding an auditor's position. I think that led to some discussion also about having an audit committee. There's also been discussion about having a finance or budget committee. So just generally, that's why this item is on the agenda, to continue that discussion. And at some point, I would also be interested in Dr. Goswami's viewpoint on this subject matter as well. But Marcia, you've been the one who I think was originally brought up the idea of a budget and finance committee, and maybe you could start us off.
Well, I do support the idea of a finance committee in this time of budget challenges that we have, in part because I think that some of our folks within the college feel that that is a better forum than this for some of those budget discussions, so that they can participate more easily. We can bring out some of the issues in somewhat more greater detail and allow them to feel more a part of the process of those solutions or issues as they come up. So I think there is real interest among some in the college of having that kind of much more informal discussion. As a second item, I do support Helen Benjamin's recommendation about an audit, internal auditor. We were told, as I recall, by FCMAT that it was a legal requirement because we do the payrolls that we have an internal auditor. And so I don't see a good way not to have an internal auditor because that's something we have been told apparently that we need to do. And I do think there are, the annual audit that we do is limited to certain topics. I think there are other topics that need attention from my experience.
Other comments? Jonathan?
I was going to say the same thing, that I really support the internal audit as a way for us to really dig deep and figure out what our finances look like and how we can move forward. Because right now it's hard to really just look at what we get as the budget. The audit will really give us a just greater insight, and it's worth the cost in the long run.
Are you talking about having an auditor, part of administration, as opposed to an audit committee? Is that?
I think having just the audit happen, like an internal audit happen, would be good. The committee would be good to oversee it and to stay in touch with what's going on. So I do support the idea of the committee as well, but the audit itself, I think, is chief for me.
Trustee Parker.
I know that we do an annual audit, but I just want to share that when Santa Barbara Unified brought in, based on a FCMAT strong recommendation, brought in an internal auditor, it made a big difference in controlling costs and making sure that that we were on top of things. But this is something that I would really want to hear from our own finance people about whether it's, what they're thinking about it. But certainly FCMAT tends to know what they're talking about.
I would support what Kate just said about it. I'd want to hear what Dr. Goswami and maybe directly, our VP.
I have some, well, I guess we're talking about a number of different things. One, as to having a budget committee or finance committee, while there's some appeal for that, as Marcia has explained, I get concerned that that's going to put additional demands on the administration that we may not want to put on them. And secondly, I think as to the budget and finance, I think all of us have an obligation to be doing a deep dive on the numbers. And I get worried that if we have a committee, we're kind of letting the committee do the work and not ourselves. So I think it's one of our major responsibilities. So I'm not convinced that we need a committee to deal with that. I'd like to hear other thoughts on it.
Well, we did have a committee of the board that dealt with, that gave...
Was it a standing committee?
It was a standing committee, and it gave primacy to the budget and to expenditures. I don't think they ever accepted the added responsibility of overseeing an audit. I'm not even sure that we ever thought about having an internal audit. We always had an external audit. But the external audit is sort of a macro approach to this business, and an internal audit, as I understand Dr. Benjamin's argument, an internal audit would be far more focused and perhaps more, well, as Kate said, you benefited at the Santa Barbara Unified School District significantly by having it. So I'm separating the idea of a committee, which I think is a good one, from the idea of having a separate auditor, and I guess I could raise the same argument there as was raised against the idea of having an ombudsman. It's an additional salary. So my first step in either case would be to examine, can this be done internally without adding to the budget woes, which I think would be a clear indication of opposition, not just from us who do not receive a salary, but from everybody else who does receive a salary, because it means that it would necessarily impact on those salaries. So I like the idea of a committee. I think a next step might be to craft it's sort of a job description. What is it that we expect of that committee? And it would be from 3 people on this board. I think that could help inform the rest of us to a deeper level than is currently happening.
Trustee Guiaro, we haven't heard from you on this subject. What are your thoughts?
I was going to tell you something, and I started listening to Peter and then thinking about what Peter was saying. You're talking about the deep dive on the budget, and the difference or the benefit to having a committee, there's pros and cons. If you guys remember, I was the one that was like, we can get rid of them, you guys. Everybody should be knowledgeable on the budget. Our agendas are pretty long, and so on a fiscal committee agenda, you're just going to have one item. And so you're going to be able to dive in, and you're not going to be like, okay, well, we've got to move on. And so that's the benefit, is that you're sitting around a table and you're talking. And from what I remember, I think that's how I got to really know Dean Evans and Kim Monda, and those were, I think, the 2 academic senate presidents that I still can hear, and I feel like we had really great relationships with them because they were sitting around. And Cornelia, my gosh, she's so smart. She crunches numbers for us. and which I felt like there's like just another person having a dialogue. So that's the benefits to it that I really enjoyed. When I was not on the fiscal committee, I simply listened to the tape the next day or whenever it came live, because you can't go to the meeting, right, because it would be over. And so I always read the agenda, and then I listened to the tapes. And then all the attachments are on there. And so then when we did come to the full board meeting, even though I wasn't there saying anything, I listened to it. I felt like I was on top of it, and then I could participate at the regular meeting. And so my only question would be, is this the right time for our staff? Can our staff do another meeting? Can the president prepare another agenda with the chair of that committee? And we may or may not be ready for that, because again, let's just be mindful of everything we've been through. And so a lot of the things that have or have not happened are just because of the reality of what's been going on here. So that's really to yield to you, Dr. Goswami, if you feel this is a right time to do that.
And before we hear from Dr. Goswami, is anybody else?
Yeah.
Craig.
I served on that committee, the finance committee, for some time. And after it was disbanded, I noticed that all the board members were asking more questions about the budget and actually paying more attention to it because it was presented. But it does eat up a lot of time at board meetings. Also, there's less opportunity to casually ask other questions or to learn how something works or goes together, because this is a different that's a little bit different atmosphere. Even though it's recorded, it's not like sitting here. So it does give the opportunity to make oneself more knowledgeable and be able to understand details a little bit. But it also gives the opportunity for dog and pony shows by staff to give us something to fill the time, because there has to be a meeting. And that took up a little bit of time. Some of the stuff about details on paving a parking lot or this or that was happening, talking years ago before our current VP of business. It was just filling time. And because it was traditional to do that, I don't have time for dog and pony shows. I have a life to live, and I want to devote what time I have to the college for some good. So I'm going to pay attention to fiscal stuff no matter whether you make a committee or not. If you do a committee, I'll serve on it. I'll be happy to. But I don't know that it's necessary if we're willing to devote the time here. And depending on the atmosphere that Dr. Goswami achieves about staff and our availability to ask questions, maybe we don't need it. So that again, president's decision, and I guess the board's decision. If we want to have a finance committee, we can do that. It's a standing committee, or we could make an ad hoc one for so long. I don't know about the exact rules. We could do one for a few months. The budget is really a problem right now. Now it's even worse because we didn't get enough reduction in expenditures to balance the budget, and now we're even a couple more $1 million in the hole. So it's like, we need to be paying super amount of attention. I hope everybody's got that message, so I guess we should devote the time during the meeting to it. That's enough. I don't need any more time. Thanks.
For the meeting thing, we did, towards the end, if there was nothing to report, then we didn't have a meeting.
Right.
Because of that. And Lori would tell us, look, we don't have anything for facilities or Ed Poly, whatever. And so.
Yeah,
so
I sort of screamed about that, wasting time.
So whatever we come, if we do or don't, if there's nothing, I would certainly not expect to be here. I mean, I like it here, but I wouldn't expect Lindsay or James or somebody to just bring something for fun. So that I think covered that. I think we took care of that. We had already said no meetings.
Yeah, we fixed that. No meetings unless it's meaningful. And that cut the amount of time way back.
So Dr. Goswami.
I mean, budget committees are, it's for the board to decide how to get its work done. And you can envision budget committees in many different ways. From my perspective, things that might be helpful to the board as it does the duties of the board, the fiduciary responsibility, is I don't envision a budget committee meeting every month. There is really nothing much to discuss every month regarding the budget, but can be deeply involved in developing the budget assumptions. So right now in our processes, we'll present to you something in April or May, and you'll get a month or so to think about it, and then you vote on the budget. But if you have a budget committee, then the budget committee can get involved in developing the assumptions. And the questions that the board might have, that, well, is 3% the right number or 2.2? So, what happens if you do 2.2? Or whatever. So that could be helpful for the board, because all the, so that there is a group of members of your colleagues can report back to you that we consider all the scenarios and determine that this is the best scenario to adopt for this year. Similarly, in terms of broad allocation of dollars, you can have conversations about, okay, here is our strategic themes and things like that. How are we allocating money towards our strategic themes? And that could be a good conversation to be had in a committee meeting. General oversight, where are we in terms of whether we're at 40% of the year and are we at 37%? I don't think that's the job of a committee. That's we just report. But for the board, or even think about strategies in terms of because we are going to face significant challenges. And when you have 85 to 90% of your budget on people, there are not many ways to look at things. So as a result, how do you best manage that? And hopefully, if the committee charge is right, you can develop what I always like is a multi-year approach to budgets. We try to solve everything in one time, and we didn't get solved, and we tried again next year to solve it in 1 year, and it doesn't get solved. So I think we need to figure out ways how we take a multi-year approach to various things. So that can bleed into your technology replacement plan and all of those things. So those kind of conversations, the deep conversations you can have at a committee level, I certainly would not want the committee to kind of try to do the job that Lindsay does or James does, because that's their job, to figure out why somebody spent $27. So I don't want the committee to go into looking at, you can always have a right to ask why somebody spent $27, but that should be the exception, not the norm. So what I'm saying is that there are ways where I can envision that the budget committee can be helpful to the board in terms of doing its work. At the same time, majority of the other budget oversight happens here. So I will separate the oversight, which is the entire board responsibility, to some of the more of the little nuances in developing a budget to the committee.
What about the idea of an auditor? Let me look into where FICMAT stands and what the California rules and regulations are. Generally my experience outside of California is that we are not that complex of an institution to have an internal auditor. We can certainly benefit from having a spot audit done this year, scrub everything, and then we find where our problems are, and then there is no need for auditor for a number of years.
So we can certainly do a process audit. Okay.
Okay.
But we're not that complex in a sense that, no, that the auditor will be fully occupied in future years. First year will be fully occupied because now, okay, what's your process of control of purchasing to payroll? And how does payroll separates this from that? All of that stuff. Or when a department orders something, did you order from the most efficient vendor or whatever? So that's something you can do, kind of a one-off activity, and identify which are the areas where we might have some, And then if you uncover there's a lot of issues, then we may think, well, maybe we should have a person for a number of years because we have a number of issues. But otherwise, no. We're not that complex in a sense. So every 4 or 5 years, bring somebody from the outside to do a different kind of audit. Not the financial audit, but more of a checks in our processes, financial processes. I think that might help accomplish what you're trying to accomplish in terms of your fiduciary responsibilities.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for being very candid. And, well, you certainly have some experience and a couple degrees in economics. So if you feel comfortable, I'm the reading teacher, so I have to really work at understanding the money part of it.
So unless we have more comments or questions on this subject, I would entertain a motion.
It's discussion. We're just discussing.
Oh, to adjourn, I think he
To
wants to
adjourn.
Oh, okay.
Close session.
I thought you
To
were going
close
to do
this-
something with this.
No, I didn't finish my sentence. To close session, and I could read the 2 items on our,
Let me just try to summarize where I think I am as a consequence of this decision, that I like the idea of a SNAP audit of the sort that you described, but I also like the idea of having a subset of the board act as a general finance committee with the proviso that they're not looking at weeds, they're looking at the larger picture and helping establish priorities, helping establish budgetary goals at the beginning of the year. And they don't need to meet every month. And I think at some point we need to be very clear that if the liabilities or the costs of so doing to staff, for example, of having to prepare for such a meeting outweigh the benefits derived from the committee's deliberations, well, we need to rethink this, because that's, I think I speak for everybody, that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is have a tool that gets us a better handle on budgetary matters.
so would you wrap the audit function on the committee into the same committee, or 2 different committees? Would it be a separate committee?
I don't think I like Dr. Goswami's approach more than I like my approach.
I think he's synthesizing for us. This is Professor Hosland synthesizing what he heard.
I think there's a threshold question. If we're legally required, it's not our choice. And I
have to look into that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
As to have
to repeat, to have one. And maybe there's a question of how we have one, how do we accommodate that requirement? But to repeat the thought, I do think there are areas that I'm aware of where we really need to audit. So, and that could be the first shot at an audit, and it could lead to a better business process, which I think you're talking about, Dr. Goswami. But we want to be sure that those stay in place.
Any other comments on this subject? We have 2, if not, we have 2 closed session items tonight. Number 1, public employee discipline dismissal release under Government Code Section 54957, and number 2, conference with labor negotiators under Government Code Section 54957.6. employee organizations, faculty association, and district negotiators, Dr. Goswami, Michael Shanahan, and Lindsay Moss. Having stated that, do I hear a motion to adjourn to closed session?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by trustee Haslam, seconded by trustee Gallardo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Can I run to the restroom?
Yes, you can.